Hello, friends. Welcome back to the While We're Waiting Hope After Child Loss podcast. I'm Jill Sullivan, your host and one of the co-founders of the While We're Waiting ministry. This is a podcast of stories of devastating loss and grief and heartbreak and struggle, and stories of hope and healing and faith and, yes, even joy. Underlying every conversation is the hope we have in Jesus Christ, which makes it possible to not just survive the loss of a child, but to live well while we're waiting to see them again in heaven one day. You can learn more about our ministry and the free bereaved parent retreats we host by visiting our website at www.whilewe'rewaiting.org. Welcome to episode number 262, which is a continuation of my conversation with Greg and Cathy Buffkin. In this episode, they speak directly to the grieving parent, especially the one who has lost a child to suicide and is wondering how to take the next breath, let alone the next step. With transparency and tenderness, they offer hard-won wisdom from their own journey, sharing what sustained them through the darkest days and how God's presence, along with the support of others, has helped carry them forward. They speak honestly about the emotional weight of guilt, the unique struggles of grieving as a couple, and the often overlooked pain of surviving siblings. They also introduce us to their ministry, the Empty Chair Endeavor, and the purpose it has brought in the wake of devastating loss. This episode is filled with insight, encouragement, and a message of hope for anyone navigating the deep waters of grief. Let's rejoin the conversation. So, what advice would you give to that listener who's listening today and they're right at the very beginning of their grief journey, in those early days or weeks or months, maybe even particularly someone who has lost a child to suicide? What would you say to that parent?
Why don't you share from the standpoint of a mom to another mom?
Yeah, that's really hard, because as a mom, there's a different bond between a mother and a child.
Sure.
Than there is for a father and a child. Not that it's any less, but I mean it's different, and it's very intense. But I would say, like I said before, I experienced those feelings of anger and doubt and questioning, but I always knew deep down that it was going to be okay. And because we knew where Ryan was and that we would see him again, that I would see him again, those first weeks or couple of months, I can honestly say that the only thing I wanted to do was go be with Ryan. Even though I had my family here, I have another child, I have Whitney, I have grandchildren. But in those first few weeks, all I could think about was just I wanted to go be with Ryan. And that, those feelings are, I think, for a mom are very normal, because God gave us that. And God understands the anger. I knew that he could take it. He's a big boy. And I knew that eventually I would get past it, even though my heart knew that I would get past it. My brain wasn't quite sure. Back then, if somebody had told me that this is where I would be today, I would have said, "You're out of your mind. I'm not even sure I'm going to make it through the first year." But because of my faith, my family, my friends, you lean on that. You lean on them, and you let it carry you through. And that's the only thing. It would have been so easy to just stay in bed all day, for days. But I didn't want to do that, because I knew that that's not what Ryan would have wanted from me. So that kind of gave me the motivation, not to get that way. it's been quite an experience. It's been a learning experience, a growing experience, and God has brought us through. That's for sure.
Amen.
No question. No
Yes.
question.
What about you, Greg? What advice might you have for somebody at the very beginning of this process?
You know, a few years back, I thought, I had lots of advice to offer people who were grieving because both of us wanted to help them. But one of the things I've learned since is because everybody's grief is different and unique, we try to shy away from offering advice. So instead, we offer what God's done and what's come out of our experience on our grief and healing journey and what has helped us. And I now have the benefit of having, like you, having gotten to meet some of the most amazing people in the world who've lost a child, but to see what God's done to restore the hope and meaning and purpose and joy in their lives again. I can offer some of what I've learned from them. Like Cathy indicated, lean into it as much as you can. I mean, nobody wants to have to do it. It's one of those things that if you could just snap your fingers and escape the grief process, you would do that, particularly those first few days, weeks, and months, because there's no sugarcoating it. Grief is hard, it's messy, it's painful, but you've got to go through it. Because if you don't now, you will eventually, and it will manifest itself later, sometimes in ways that are more destructive. And so, as you lean into it, allow other people into that journey. Trusted people. It doesn't mean you have to allow everybody you know into that journey, but people you can trust, the people don't try to come along and fix you, because bereaved parents aren't projects that need fixing. We need other people. Sometimes we don't want to be around other people. Sometimes we crave being around other people. And that's why I say it's messy, because it's not so predictable. We were very blessed in that for both of us, we already had a relationship with Jesus going into this trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I don't think either of us would have survived it. We had other people in place in our lives. We, as Cathy indicated earlier, we were already part of a small group that met in our home, and we took a break for I think for November and December for obvious reasons. But in January we started back, and so every week, these people who loved on us, who let us share our stories, who let us talk about Ryan over and over and over and over. They have no idea the difference that made. And so we had the freedom to be able to do that. And sometimes when you're in a season like that, people can help carry your grief. It may not make any sense to somebody who's never been there before, but when there are people who know you and love you, some know your child, some didn't, it helps when they can help carry some of that burden. The other thing that's a huge benefit is that when your faith is weak and you feel like you just don't have anything left, you can borrow from their faith.
That's right.
And it's an incredible source of strength. But I also don't want to diminish in any way, shape, or form the importance of being able to grieve with your mate. And we need to be able to do that and talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, then we don't know what our mate's experiencing. It's real easy to because I grieve in this particular way, my unique way of grieving, that it would be easy to expect your mate to grieve in the same way. And like I'm sure you've heard too, Jill, stories from guests who have shared about how they got angry with their spouse. And it typically happens more with, I think, with the moms than it does the dads, in that, as you know, it is different for a mom. And the intensity, I think, is deeper for a mom. And so when she doesn't see her husband as emotional as she is and as distraught as she is, then sometimes she might get angry with him or feel resentful. The truth of the matter is, though, he is grieving, but in a different way. And sometimes, it means that for men, they dive back into work. Sometimes it means into a hobby. And for some men, we have a reputation for being, for compartmentalizing things in our lives. And unfortunately, we do that sometimes to the detriment of our own good and in our marriage.
Mm-hmm. And we've got to be able to give each other grace for those different ways that we grieve, right?
You do, and if you don't know what your mate is experiencing, and how they're trying to process it, then it's hard to be as understanding and empathetic, because you're dealing with your own grief.
Right. Comes down to communication, right?
Absolutely. And the other layer of that too is if there are living children.
Yes.
Depending upon their age, they're also grieving, but a lot of times they don't share their grief with the parents because they know they've already got so much on their plate to begin with. And so those surviving siblings are referred to as the forgotten mourners.
That's right.
And we didn't realize how much Whitney was grieving because we were so consumed with our own guilt, our own grief, and all that goes along with that.
Yeah, it's so hard on the surviving siblings. We have one surviving daughter as well, and walking through, first of all, Hannah's illness and then the grief that followed was just so difficult for her as a young teenager. And, she's still processing that today. Just now she processes it as an adult. Yeah.
Whitney is still processing that also. And, we didn't know for a long time just how difficult it was for her.
Yeah.
But she's doing all the right things. She's seeing a counselor, and she's working hard. I mean, she and Ryan had such a special relationship. Yeah. And so it was truly devastating for her too. So
how much age difference was there between your two girls?
About 3.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and Bethany was the younger one, so she lost her big sister, who she looked up to, and was kind of, we always say, kind of her rudder in life. Hannah was gone, and she had to figure things out for herself. So
that's not easy.
Yeah. While we're on the sibling discussion, I wasn't planning to do this, but I'm going to put in a plug for a new ministry called Sibling Lifeline. And it is a retreat ministry, just like the retreats that we do for parents, and it's for adult siblings. Now, they can have lost their sibling at any age, but to attend the retreat, they have to be 18 and up. And we know all about it because they host them here at our retreat center in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And the gentleman who started it, he has lost 2 siblings. One sibling actually died before he was born. The other sibling, he lost an adult sibling to suicide.
Oh.
And his co-facilitator is his daughter-in-law, who has lost 2 adult siblings, 2 siblings that are older than her. So,
wow.
And these retreats are free, and they're just getting started. They've had one. They're going to be having one this upcoming weekend, and they're going to be offering more of them in the future. But the name of the ministry is Sibling Lifeline. And they have a website. It's just siblinglifeline.org. And I actually interviewed the founder of it, and we're going to be having him on a podcast sometime soon to talk more about it. But it's wonderful.
Wow.
What an amazing and unique ministry.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It's so needed. It's just something that is so needed. Siblings are kind of forgotten in this equation.
Yeah, they are. They are.
Yeah, I can see you writing, Cathy. It's siblinglifeline.org. And I will put the link in the show notes as well. And as long as we're on the topic of siblings, there's another ministry called Promise for, number 4, hope.org, promiseforhope.org, that does family style retreats for parents and minor siblings to come together to a retreat. They do those in various locations, not here, but that's also a free ministry. Promise for, the number 4, hope.org. And I will put that in the show notes as well, because I have such a heart for bereaved siblings. It's a hard road.
And a lot of
Thank
times
you.
people don't know what to do with brothers and sisters who have lost a child, particularly at work. I think it's unfortunate that for adult bereaved siblings, when they go back to work, everybody expects them to just, the funeral's over, you go back to work and you're responsible for your normal everyday responsibilities, and you should be over it, and you should be able to perform at a level that you were performing at prior to that event.
Right. And we as parents, we very often get a decent grace period at our jobs where we don't have to immediately go back. And if we do, we're really not expected to perform at the same level. The people around us give us got a lot of space.
Yeah.
Typically. I know that's not the case for everyone. But our surviving children, like you said, have to go right back to work or right back to school. Bethany had to go back to junior high.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
face all the questions from your peers. And, it's difficult. It's really, really difficult for them.
Whitney faced that after Ryan passed away. She was in an agency that when she came back, boy, she was expected to just fall, right back in and do exactly as she had done before. No grace, no sympathy. And it was devastating for her. And she ended up leaving that office because of it. So,
well, and to emphasize Cathy's point, her boss actually made the comment to her a few weeks into it.
mm-hmm.
I just don't know what to do with you anymore.
Oh. Mm.
Yeah, it was so.
I mean,
I think it's important that employers
absolutely
learn about how to handle, how to deal with grieving employees.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just so many levels
Mm-hmm.
that are related to child loss and sibling loss and all of those things. I think that all of us who have lost a child have this very sharp dividing line in our lives that kind of separates the before and the after. Talk about the before Greg and Cathy and the after Greg and Cathy.
Well, that is very accurate.
Yeah, because we're changed. We're different. We're different people.
We are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We are.
You can't go through something like that and be the same. I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah, I was a teacher for 30 years. That was my identity, other than being a wife and mom. So I was very involved in my teaching. I loved it. I enjoyed it. And, I kind of think of myself then as being probably more of an extrovert. I enjoyed being around people. It didn't bother me being around a crowd, just things like that. And I have found that since we lost Ryan and have been on this, grief journey, I have had to learn to be content with myself And I find that it is harder to be around a large group of people. So I
Grocery
guess,
stores.
yeah,
Yeah.
grocery stores.
Yes.
No, I can remember, for a long time after Ryan died, well, not for a long time, but for a period of time after he died, I would, especially after Greg went back to work, just doing simple things like going to the grocery store or, just drugstore, whatever, running errands. I would get to the parking lot and I would just sit there and say, I can't do this. I cannot go in there. And so I would come back home. I just could not do it. So that was very, very different. And of course, that's gotten better over time. But in the beginning, that was really, really difficult. We didn't go back to church for probably 2 months, maybe. It was just, and when we did start going back, we would go in late. We would sit at the very back of the church, and we would leave early because we just didn't want to have to face a lot of questions, or we didn't want to have to engage
Right.
with people too much.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I experienced a lot of those same things. Going back to the grocery store was so hard.
Yeah.
Ah,
Just doing the simple things that you had done before.
right, right. Going back to church was really hard for me too.
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago, in your case, and 16 years ago, in my case, they didn't have grocery pickup or Walmart delivery.
Instacart.
I don't know that we even had Amazon back then, so you had, if you needed food, you had to go to the store.
You did.
There really was not an option. So yeah, you had to learn to face those things, but it was not easy. That's for sure.
No.
Let me ask you this question. I know people often feel awkward around someone who's lost a child, just in general, because they don't know what to say.
Right.
And I would imagine that's even more true in a circumstance where a child dies by suicide. So what is some advice that you might give to someone who is wondering what they could say or do to help someone who has experienced the loss of a child to suicide?
First of all, there's nothing that you can say to us that will hurt us any more than we've already been hurt. We have already experienced the worst hurt imaginable. So, as Greg always says, take the risk. Just ask. Don't be afraid to bring up our child's name.
Yeah. And if it's you that has lost a child to suicide, we know that every day you're wrestling with unending questions. You want to know why, because as a parent, you feel like if you knew why, then maybe you could have changed the outcome. As a dad, it's our role to be our family's protector and defender and the leader in the home, and, which implies at least a certain perceived degree of control. And what you discover after you lose a child is that all that control that you thought you had was nothing but an illusion.
Right.
And so for us, you're probably dealing with some guilt because you feel like if you had known, and you fill in the blank, then maybe you could have stopped it. You're probably feeling guilty because maybe you feel like what did I do wrong when they were growing up? How did I fail them as a parent that they would make a decision like that? So there is a lot of guilt to have to figure out how to process and navigate through in a healthy way. And one of the things that the Lord spoke to me about in those first few months, I guess at least it was that even if he gave me the answer to every single question that I had, it wouldn't have changed the outcome. I would have had the answers, and I might then have to deal with a whole different set of emotions and questions, because then I had these answers that I thought I needed answering. And I believe that very often in our lives, because God knows the past, present, and future all at the same time, that there are things that he doesn't share with us that we feel like we have got to have the answer to. You know, God, if I just had the answer to this, if you just tell me this, then I could handle it better, or I could move ahead. That might not necessarily be the case. It might actually be harder to handle if we had those answers. So for us, again, there's more similarities than differences when you're dealing with the loss of a child to suicide as opposed to an accident, a homicide, or a slow, a slow death because of a horrible disease like like your daughter. We lose our child regardless of how it happens. I mean, in the final analysis, it doesn't really matter how it happened. It happened. And so our lives have been turned upside down. We are a mess for a while. And so lean into it. As we talked about earlier, the best thing you can do is to just go ahead and allow yourself to experience what sometimes you want to keep at arm's length. Try to avoid keeping other people at arm's length. Let some of them in. One of the things that was beneficial to us, Jill, because we had the connection to be able to do this, was to see a Christian counselor. I understand not everybody has that option, but if you do, it's an invaluable resource. And we started that process probably 2 weeks after we lost Ryan. And we continued that for about 3.5 years. And it's not that the counselor always has these incredible suggestions. It's that they listen and they help you to be able to navigate through how you're processing that. And sometimes you just need to hear somebody else who is a little bit more detached from that situation almost kind of interpret what you're saying and feeling, if that makes sense. We believe that's very helpful. And just another thing that helped us a lot was because we had a relationship with the Lord, just continuing in those rhythms of life, getting up in the morning, spending time in God's Word, spending time with Him alone, even though sometimes you don't want to. Sometimes, particularly early on, you don't even know what to pray or how to pray. But just continuing in that rhythm, God knows what you're feeling. He knows what you're struggling with, and He'll meet you there. I mean, He just will. It's Psalm 34:18, I believe, that says, "And God is close to the brokenhearted, and He heals those who are crushed in spirit." And that's so descriptive for a bereaved parent. We're absolutely crushed. And God is so incredibly kind and compassionate to us when we're in something like that. I mean, I know that you guys know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have experienced that as well. And that is such a gift to have that, to have that side of God
Yeah.
turn toward us, that compassionate kindness, and to feel that is really something special.
One last thought I would offer is grieving parents can be very hard on themselves, because sometimes I think we try to live up to others' expectations of us. And it's not uncommon unfortunately, for some people to hear things like, don't you think it's time for you to move on? Don't you think it's time for you to get over this now? I mean, it's been 6 months. Come on.
Right.
And, that it's because they haven't experienced it. They
Right.
don't know what you're going through. And so they can lay expectations on us that, depending upon how you're wired, you might actually believe that and try to live up to that. And nothing could be further from the truth. Every grief journey is different, and there's no right or wrong way to grieve.
Yeah. And there's no specified length of time either.
No term limits
Right.
on grief.
Yeah. No term limits. I like that. Well said. So you started a ministry in the aftermath of your loss, and I love the name. Will you share the name of your ministry and a little bit about it with our listeners?
Sure, would love to. It's about 5 years after Ryan died. Two other couples that we went to church with both lost a child within about 2 months of each other. So this is 5 years after we've lost Ryan, and we all wanted to do something to help other grieving parents and help other people understand what we're all going through. So we, after several months of talking and meeting together and praying about it, we came up with the name, the Empty Chair Endeavor. And I think it's, the name is obvious. You often read about that empty chair that is just, I mean, it's a sad thing to envision, and it's a sadder thing to have one of those. So we initially, we felt like the vision that the Lord gave us was twofold. One was, and initially, Jill, it was primarily to help equip and prepare people to help come alongside and encourage and just walk with people who have lost a child, because it's not rocket science. We don't come with an instruction booklet on how to do that. And let's face it, the church, the Big C church, has not been the greatest resource for that in a lot of respects. So that's what we wanted to do. And so we set out, we started the ministry, we kicked it off in November of 21, I believe it was. And so our vision was to go out, call on pastors and churches, church leaders, and even civic organizations to look for opportunities to come in and just share our vision and share what we wanted to offer them. We're not a nonprofit, and we're not a for-profit. We just want to help people. And so we felt like we weren't getting a whole lot of traction doing that. We only had a couple of offers to come and speak. So I was getting pretty frustrated with it, because I just felt like we weren't going anywhere. And I guess it was probably around May of that following year that, I was praying about it and just asking God, what do I do? And it was the strangest thing. I just felt like He gave me this phrase, pause and pivot. And I didn't want to pause because it felt like we hardly had any traction at that point. And if I paused, we'd lose it all. The pivot part, I just didn't have a clue about. It just didn't make sense. Cathy and I got invited that summer to be on a podcast with Davy Blackburn of Nothing is Wasted Ministries, and to share our story. And when we did, it was, in the days following that, it was like the Lord was saying, so this is a way that you can reach people that you would never be able to reach geographically, personally, in any way, shape, or form. But I didn't have a clue about podcasting. I mean, I had never listened to a podcast, let alone knew anything about it. So I thought, okay, this is, God's got a really good sense of humor. Not only do I not know anything about that, but I'm not a real tech savvy guy.
Sure.
It just didn't come with my generation.
Yeah.
So after a few months of learning as much as I could, we started our own podcast in December of that year called, interestingly enough, sounds a lot like another podcast I've heard about called Hope After Child Loss.
Right.
Oh, I believe that's yours, right?
It's our subtitle. That's what I keep telling you. It's our
Right.
subtitle.
Right. Yours is While We're Waiting, Hope After Child Loss. Ours
Right.
is Hope After Child Loss, The Empty Chair Endeavor.
Yeah, so we're fine.
Great minds, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of the story behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your podcast is similar to this one in that you interview bereaved parents.
Exactly. And I have interviewed 2 or 3 bereaved siblings that early on. I have those are a lot more difficult to come by for some reason. But yes, that is exactly what we do. My podcast, or our podcast, is only every other week, where
Mm-hmm.
yours is weekly, right?
It is, but most of my interviews are divided in half. So, we publish every week, but it's usually a continuation of the episode before.
Yeah. And you've got yours is, if you Google podcasts on bereaved parents, yours is one of the first ones that pops up.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed it. I'm like you, self-taught. We started during COVID because, our ministry is all gathering based. And of course, we couldn't gather. We couldn't do retreats. We couldn't do support groups. We couldn't do anything for a long time. So we started the podcast in July of 2020. Again, just like you, I went on YouTube and learned how to do it and did the best I could. And thankfully, I've learned a lot through the years, and I have a wonderful editor now, so I don't have to do all of that myself. And because we've done so many retreats and met so many bereaved parents, I've had the opportunity to interview so many that I already know from retreats and have them share their stories, and then you guys. And so it's been a blessing to us. We have really, really enjoyed doing the podcast.
I know exactly what you mean. It's, the subject matter is heavy, but as you and I have talked about before, we get to meet some of the sweetest and some of the most amazing, godly people on the planet.
Yes.
And knowing what they've been through and seeing where they are at that any given point in time, I mean, I can hardly even describe how much I love doing that.
Yeah. I feel the same way. So, and that's a good thing. I'm glad we both enjoy this opportunity. And mostly it's just because I enjoy talking to people that have lost children,
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know if that makes us weird because I don't think that's something most people enjoy doing.
I don't think so.
But there's so much richness in it. And I think people miss out when they don't have the opportunity to talk to people like we do, like we have the opportunity to.
Yeah. So. And if it means being weird, then I am honored to be weird.
That's right. All right. Well, we need to wrap up our conversation. There's always one question that I like to ask as I'm closing an episode, and that is, has music been an important part of your grief journey? And if so, what is on your playlist?
I will turn that over first to Cathy.
Yeah, music has always been an important part of my life. I grew up with music in the house and just, played the guitar early on. And so, music has always been important to me. And it was to Ryan. That is something that we definitely shared. And it has ministered to me so greatly during this grief process. I have praise and worship songs on one of my playlists. I have songs that Ryan and I liked together by groups that we both loved. And so, it's always good to go back and listen to some of those. Some of them make me cry, some of them, make me feel good because it meant a lot to him. And it's something that we shared. It continues to it mean, a lot to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I have one particular song, and I think Ryan likes it. Greg likes it too. Ryan didn't know it. It's by Daniel. No, is it Dan Goki?
Danny
Oh,
Good.
Danny
Danny
Goki. Yeah.
Goki.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Tell Your Heart to Beat Again.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That song really ministered to me early on.
Yeah. I love that God gave us music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a comfort and an encouragement, and it's just a blessing.
Yeah, I get in the car and the first thing I do is turn on the music. Greg gets in the car and doesn't ever think about turning on the music. So
God puts opposites together so often, doesn't he?
That's right. That's right.
I couldn't listen to music for a very long time after we lost Ryan because it was just too hard.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually ministered to better through the spoken word.
Uh-huh.
And for me, particularly if I was by myself, which I spent a lot of time by myself in the car because I was on the road every day. I would spend time on the phone talking to other reps that were friends of mine. I might would listen to talk radio or something, and it's just been in the last, I don't know, maybe the last 3 years that when I'm in the car with Cathy, if we're on a trip together, or I mean, just here in town, I can listen to it because she's with me.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm by myself in the truck, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand that. Yeah. We always listened to K-Love when we were driving back, right after Hannah went to heaven. And there were a lot of songs that came on, and I would just have to punch that
Yep.
radio button, not listening to that one.
yeah,
Switch to another station.
Absolutely.
So, but, I can listen to them now. So, yeah.
we actually have a friend of Ryan's. They were in school together for many years, and he is a songwriter musician, and he texted us a couple of weeks ago and said that he had written a song for Ryan and
Some of his
a couple
buddies.
of his other buddies, and he sent us the song so that we could listen to it, and
Before it gets published.
yeah, and it's one that Ryan would love.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
that means a lot,
Oh, absolutely.
things like that.
Yeah, just to get something like that out of, seemingly out of nowhere, just a text that comes through. And I haven't talked to Michael in years. Oh, well, probably a year. I'm sorry. But when we listened to that, it was a little
hard.
bit hard to listen to begin with. And,
Sure.
But I texted him back and told him he has no idea what that means to us.
Mm-hmm.
Just
right.
that he was thinking about Ryan when he was writing that song.
Yeah. Especially after so many years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
exactly.
an amazing gift.
It is.
Wonderful. Yeah. All right. Well, we need to wrap up our conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we go?
Now, the only thing that I would say, Jill, is thank you so much for all that you and Brad do to help other grieving parents. Thank you for the retreats that you guys do and for your podcast. You've been at it a lot longer than we have. And I'm so appreciative of people who step into their pain and let God use that pain for his purposes to help other people. And when it first happened, there were very few resources. And now, because of people like you and Brad and other parents who want to help, there are a lot more resources available to grieving parents. So thank you so much.
Well, I always say, and it is true, that the blessing is all ours. So
Amen.
Thank you for what you do as well.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for having us on your podcast, Jill.
Yeah, it's a blessing. I've enjoyed our conversation.
It has been a
have to.
blessing.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the While We're Waiting Hope After Child Loss podcast. If this podcast has been a blessing to you, please take just a moment to leave a rating or a review, and please feel free to share it with someone you know who might be helped by it. We're so grateful for all of you who come back and listen every week, and those of you who may be listening for the very first time. I hope God has used it to encourage you today and to help you live well while you're waiting.